Hey guys, what's going on? My name is Dr. Colin Zhu, and thank you so much for being here with us. This is the Thrive Bites podcast, and welcome to season 5. Here we talk about 3 things: plant-powered living, enhancing emotional resilience, and creating a thriving mindset. And I interview the most passionate guests here, ranging from physicians to coaches to dietitians to entrepreneurs. And my hope is to give you really informative and high-valued conversations. So please follow us here on YouTube, Spotify, Apple, and wherever you hear your podcasts. Come on in, and I can't wait to see you inside. Hey guys, welcome to this season opener, episode 1 for season 5 of the Thrive Bites podcast. I am so glad that you are here with us, and I'm super stoked for this episode. My guest for today is Danielle Ripley-Burgess, and she is the chief storyteller for Fight CRC, which is fighting colorectal cancer. And it's a great episode. We go into the origin story about how not only she had to face colorectal cancer once, but also she had to face it twice. So it's a very, very interesting and personal story. We talk about how she, went through that, how she processed through that. We talk about misconceptions. We go over a few statistics with colorectal cancer, and we go into her advocacy, editing, and communications work with Fight CRC organization. And it's a great story. A few facts about colorectal cancer that I definitely want to highlight is colorectal cancer is the second leading cause of cancer death among men and women combined in the US. And 25 to 30% of colorectal patients have a family history. 1 in 23 men and 1 in 25 women will be diagnosed with colorectal cancer. And the good news about that is that it's very preventable with screening, and they're affordable, and there's also take-home options exist. In fact, up to 60% of colorectal cancer deaths can be prevented with screening. So here are a few facts for colorectal cancer under 50. 1 in 10 colorectal cancers are actually diagnosed in patients under 50 years of age. And the rates of early onset colorectal cancer has been steadily rising since the mid-90s. There's been a 51% increase in cases between 20 and 49 years of age from 1994 to 2012. So this is a very important episode, and of course, with all of our episodes, I highly encourage that you seek a healthcare profession, with your primary care physician, specialist, or mental health professional as well. And these are just for information purposes, but thank you so much for joining in, and let's get into the episode. Okay, guys, and welcome to another episode of Thrive Bites. Welcome to season 5. We are super, super excited for this upcoming season. I have a great guest for today, and I am truly, truly honored and stoked for our next guest. And I'm just going to read a little bit about her bio. Her full name is Danielle Ripley-Burgess, and she is a 2-time colorectal cancer survivor, first diagnosed at age 17. And she's been ever since a part of a growing community of an early onset survivors facing the disease well before the age of 50. She has joined Fight CRC, which stands for colorectal cancer, as an advocate back in 2012, and has since been part of that community ever since. And she serves as the first director of communications for 5 years. And currently she brings strategic communications and public relations support to the team. She's also the editor-in-chief of Beyond Blue. Super excited to talk about that further. And through her partnerships and networking, they have reached millions of people during March, Colorectal Cancer Awareness Month. And her personal story has been told around the world in outlets like The Today Show, BBC's World Have Your Say, Sirius Radio's Doctors Radio, the Chicago Tribune, among others. And super stoked. Please welcome Danielle. Hello.
Hi.
How's it going? Thank you so much for joining us with us for today. I'm super, super stoked.
Oh, I'm always up for telling my story and talking about colon cancer.
Where are you calling from, by the way?
Kansas City, Missouri.
Oh,
So
wow.
I'm in the Heartland, Chiefs fan, so we're really jazzed right
Because this new year, of 2022, what have you, do you have any goals or, milestones that you want to achieve for this year? Or is it one of those where, oh man, it's another year, we're still in the pandemic, what am I going to do?
Yeah, probably both. Yeah, I think all of us are probably saying, okay, let's keep on one step in front of the other. It's been interesting being a cancer survivor in the middle of a pandemic because the whole world has now learned and felt kind of what it feels like to get severely sick, and you just have to keep going, and you hope it's going to be over within a short amount of time, and actually true sickness drags on and you have to learn how to live with it in survivorship. So I would say that's probably, as I think of 2022, I think of the 2 years of COVID approaching. It's like, yeah, I think I know for me, it's like learning how to survive, but in the midst of it, also starting to set some goals.
Hmm.
For me, last year was a big year of change in almost every way. And so this year I'm just trying to maybe steady the boat a little bit and not have so many
Hmm.
areas of life just completely uh, look different.
Yeah, yeah, for sure. Yeah, it's pandemic is different where not only, it definitely gives you alarm bells, whether to take things more seriously. It definitely reminds us that life is short,
Mhm,
but also the fragility of life.
mhm,
And it's almost like it's almost like you're playing chess and you're playing, it's a little bit of a standstill, you're not really coming and going, you don't really know what's coming up ahead. And it's a very interesting time to be in. And I think what I've learned is no matter what, just keep going,
mhm.
good or bad. I've accepted that, it's out of my control. Things are super, super uncertain. That's definitely, the most factual part of all this, but it's really keep going and keep learning is what I've learned.
Yeah, yeah, those are great. When it first kicked off, I remember I wrote a column for the Philadelphia Inquirer called "The World of the Well is Learning the Ways of the Sick," and
Uh-huh.
it's about like you have to find the small things, and you have to keep going, and you have to be resilient. Um, Even though you don't know what's going to come next, you have to keep going. So I can
Yeah,
relate.
yeah. No, that's great. That's great. Resiliency is something we talk about a lot on the podcast. So I'm super excited to learn more about your story. And, you have a very interesting life experience where not only are you, you've had to survive and been diagnosed with colon cancer once, but also twice. So let's bring us back to the beginning. I like to kind of take the story from point A to point B. But what was your experience like, when you were at the right below age of 17, and when you thought that the world was your oyster, and I feel most, I can't speak for all, teenagers, but, you just kind of feel like you're invincible,
Mm.
right? You can take on the world. What was that like, when, what was going on, the context, when that happened, when you were first diagnosed?
Sure. I often start my story in actually a toilet paper aisle. And I say it starts there because that helps give context to my mindset. As a tween girl, I was really self-conscious about my body. I hated talking about anything that had to do with bathroom habits. And there was a moment where I remember going to the grocery store with my mom and having this all out fight because she wanted to buy toilet paper because we were out at home. And I refused to let her buy it with me when I was at the store. Couldn't think of anything worse than having toilet paper in our cart and my friends from school seeing us and knowing that, my family pooped, AKA I pooped. So I always start my story there to say that was my mindset. When I started seeing symptoms not too long after that, I think I was probably in around eighth grade when I first started seeing small specks of blood in my stool. And over the years, it just got worse and worse. things at home weren't good. My parents were fighting. And so it was kind of this awkward thing where my body's doing weird things already as a developing girl, but then it's doing some other weird things I don't think are quite right. Don't know much about that. Don't feel super comfortable talking to my parents about it. So I'm just going to keep it to myself and hide it. And so I did that for years. I tried my own little elimination diet. I tried removing things with red and stopped eating like tomatoes or red candies or no ketchup, things like that. Thinking, okay, I'm going to solve the problem. Maybe it's not blood. Maybe it's just something. But none of that worked. And so eventually it just got worse and worse. I do mention at one point, I did bring this up to my mom, and I'm not that old, but I've just grown up in the digital boom. So the internet was new at the time. So we did look up some of the symptoms I was having. And at that point, it was clearly hemorrhoids. I was a volleyball player, so I was active. And we thought, okay, I must be seeing hemorrhoid type stuff because everything else this would mean is serious, but it's for people grandma and grandpa's age. And I'll never forget that comment. It's for people grandma and grandpa's age. And I was like, oh, okay. Because everything online indicated if you were a young person, rectal bleeding or anything else, like you're probably good. So I was like, all right, great. I have hemorrhoids. A few years after that is when the bleeding got so bad I couldn't deny it anymore. And so I eventually told my boyfriend, actually, I confided in him what I was seeing. He's actually now my husband. We're still together. And one thing led to another. And I was thankfully rushed to a GI who did not hesitate to do a colonoscopy on me, even though I was 17 years old, a junior in high school, and he found the tumor. And I was diagnosed stage 3 colorectal cancer. And I had just turned 17 like 3 weeks prior.
Oh, wow. That must be that must have been different. Very, very much different. And did you, besides the, what you actually saw, did you feel anything? Was there, did you experience any pain, any type of discomfort, nausea, anything like that?
Yeah, looking back now that I know all the symptoms of this disease, I definitely saw other signs. The biggest one would be bloating. And then toward the end of my symptoms, right, close to the time I was diagnosed, the intense abdominal pain started. So I would describe it as it felt like there was a little man in my stomach with scissors trying to just cut his way out. And a lot of times if you hear of young patients diagnosed with this disease, a lot of us have the story of intense abdominal pain, like pain that would take them to the ER. And so I definitely had some of that. I didn't have as much nausea, didn't have constipation, diarrhea. My main symptom was blood in the stool. And then, as it advanced, bloating and abdominal pain.
Yeah, because sometimes, you can't even, sometimes you won't know until like stage 4. My grandmother, she had passed on. She was diagnosed with colorectal cancer pretty much by stage 4. And with pretty much at the, like a month later, she passed on and we didn't even know. I think the two signs were she started to have loss of appetite and she started getting these bloating, symptoms. But at that time, it went, really quickly. And it was just, hard to stop. There wasn't enough time to intervene and, things like that. So, and regardless of the age, you don't know, you could be at any stage, regardless of the age. So it's, super, super important. And, you also had a second bout with it. What age were you when that time had occurred?
Sure. I was 25, 8 years after my first diagnosis. So my first diagnosis, it's always kind of this anomaly. I'm a teenager going through this. This is 21 years ago now. It's almost like a world of its own, but that was probably the more traditional cancer experience. I would say when people think of a cancer experience, chemo, radiation, surgeries, second opinions, hospital stay, all of that came with the first diagnosis. 8 years later, I was doing routine colonoscopies and the doctor found a polyp who he was concerned about it and recommended a subtotal colectomy for me, which is a procedure that removed all but about 13 inches of my large intestine, because he said, Danielle, I think your cancer is going to try and come back. This polyp is concerning. At the time, the biopsy did not show it as cancerous. But when I eventually went in and had the surgery done a few months later, once they took out my colon and then they biopsied this suspicious polyp, it did come back as cancerous. Fortunately, it was stage 1, so we caught it early.
Mm-hmm.
Surgery I just had removed all of the cancer risk, and so I didn't have to go through treatment again after that.
Mm-hmm.
So it was really interesting because my second cancer experience is so different, because it's a win if you look at it through early prevention.
Mm-hmm.
I knew I was at risk for another cancer. I was staying on top of my screenings, and I was taking all these preventive steps, and we caught it early, so I didn't have to go through this big ordeal.
Mm-hmm.
Granted, I was still young. I was 25. And I will say it was harder emotionally, probably, for my second one.
Mm-hmm.
I was older, so what cancer means and its implications hit you differently when you're in your 20s versus your teens. And then I had to go through a huge acceptance journey of, this is life. Like, cancer isn't just this fluke that happened to me when I was in high school, and I had no idea why it happened. When I was diagnosed again, it's like, I don't mean this in an unhealthy sense, but like, cancer became my life in the sense that I'm never going to be able to escape this.
Mm-hmm.
That got the ball rolling to be more suspicious about genetics. Like, why is this girl continuing to show up with early stage disease? Once you have it twice, you're never going to get out of the doctor's follow-ups. Like, this is a lifelong thing for me.
Mm-hmm.
So I would say it was emotionally, spiritually, mentally harder the second go round.
Mm-hmm.
And the first go round was physically harder.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, most 20-year-olds, that I talk to, don't even have a primary care physician, and you probably have seen specialists upon subspecialists upon subspecialists, and then, some of their friends, right?
Yes.
So meaning like super niche group, super
Mm-hmm.
specialties. And, for those of us, I don't know, fortunately or unfortunately, to not experience that is a good thing, but it's like a door leading to another door that you don't hope to. So I can understand the mental health journey, especially being in your mid-20s, to kind of navigate through that. And it's not something that, it's not like acne, right? It's not like something super common that someone else amongst your peer group that could relate to, right? And as you were saying, around 17, what you had to look up online. You had to search for things like, how's this happening? Can this be happening? There's really not much data at that time or information at that time in terms of having these types of cancer rates within your age group. So it just didn't, I'm sure the first time it sounds like it was just more mind-boggling. And the second time it's more like, man, am I ever going to escape this, hamster wheel now that the second time, has come, so.
Yeah, it was major acceptance. And it was a process to accept, okay, this is a thing. I will always have to budget for medical appointments. Like, I will always have to think about this when I travel. Like, I will always need several doctors on my case. And it's, even in your 20s, you still kind of feel a little invincible. My peers were getting married and starting their families in their 20s, and here I am planning cancer care again, and kind of accepting my path is different than everyone else. So yeah, it was definitely a process and pretty challenging.
Did you have the support of your family and friends? And I know that you had your boyfriend at the time, who is now your husband. What was that support group like? Support group or lack, thereof. And if you had a support group, what difference did that make in terms of, having people supportive of you versus, later down the line encountering other people who are in the similar boat that were, diagnosed. Can you share those experiences with us?
Yeah, I've had great support over the years, and it's looked different. When I was younger, so family definitely rallied around me. Really, the whole community, as much as they could. This is before social media, even. So, I was a high school teen with cancer before social media. So it wasn't then what it would be now, as far as like everyone knowing, but a lot of people knew.
Mm-hmm.
I would say it was hard in high school because my friends did not know how to support me. I don't blame them. Now looking back, it's like, oh yeah, like they were trying to figure out who they were in their life, and then their friend all of a sudden disappears from school, and they don't know where I am. Only a few of them did, and they would come over. So it's been really interesting, kind of to process through all of that and say, okay, like what needs were met when I was younger and what weren't. My parents, my brother, my in-laws have always been there. I've been part of faith communities since I was little. They've been integral and like kind of getting me through this. But around a year before my second diagnosis, I actually found a group called the Colon Club, and I found them online. And when I found
Colon
them,
Club.
yeah, I was like, this can't be happening, because
Yeah.
I had never met another young colon cancer survivor. Now, I'd met a few people who'd had it older, but I'd never met anyone even under 40, especially nobody as young as me. And it was 2007, I think. And I was Googling, and I came across this website, and this group had a calendar. And I started looking through the calendar, and all of a sudden I see faces of people just like me.
Mm-hmm.
And they were survivors, men and women who had had colorectal cancer well under age 50, some in their teens, some in their 20s, some in their 30s, 40s. And I couldn't believe it, because when I was diagnosed, I was told I was one of the only in the country, one of the youngest. I went to some of the major cancer centers, and even there, they were like, we have not seen this before. I felt like such a unicorn. So to come across this site and to see I am not the only one, like
Mm-hmm.
it was, the Colon Club was founded by Molly McMaster. I think she was 22, 23 when she was
Mm-hmm.
diagnosed. And
Oh,
she
wow. Okay.
established it in memory of a friend she had met and had that experience of I'm not the only one. And her friend had passed away. So that really changed the game for me. I applied for the calendar. I got in. And so I went to this photo shoot, and we call it Colon Camp. And it was a life-changing week. I was still one of the youngest there. Really interesting. I was one of the youngest people there and one of the furthest out from my diagnosis. But it started to introduce me to the power of support with people who can relate, who can look you in the eyes and say, I get it. And it also introduced me to advocacy and kind of getting involved in some organizations that are doing really cool things to help other people, and helping other people like me who kind of feel lost or alone. So, hey, you're not alone. There's a whole troop of us back here with a similar story. That was fortunately the kind of cool divine timing is I went through that experience, and I was in the calendar, and I was in the '09 calendar, and '09, middle of the year of '09 is when my second diagnosis came. So I'd already met them. And when I was diagnosed the second time, although it was really hard, I had this group of people who really did also help me carry through it. And, everything from here's what to eat, not eat, because somebody else in the group had had a subtotal colectomy. Here's how to process this. Here's how to ask about your next genetic test, because something must be going on. And that support from that group, and I'm still in touch with them today, just invaluable.
Yeah, I mean, there's a difference between, like you said, an experience where, you have support from people that love you, whether it's family and friends and loved ones, versus people that have actually, have gone through those shared lived experiences. And like you said, can look you in the eye and say, like, I get it. It's very, I would imagine, I can't relate, but I would imagine it's a much more profound experience, to be able to share something, not as common, with someone else, in that group.
Yeah.
So I'm very glad that you found that at the time that you did, because, especially going, right before getting your second diagnosis, because, like you said, the mental health journey would have been different had you not have this type of group to kind of, go into. Did it get bigger ever since?
The group?
Yeah.
Yeah.
You still stay in touch with them?
I do. Yeah. It's neat because we were divided by calendar years when I joined.
Okay.
So it's like
So it's like class or something.
it is. It's kind of like a sorority. So I've got kind of I've got my group, but then I stayed involved. I started helping the Colon Club with PR. I joined the board for a while.
Yeah.
And so yeah, my community grew as far as getting to meet people who came into the Colon Club. All of them were specifically younger, kind of the mission of that group. But then a friend at the Colon Club is actually who introduced me to Fight Colorectal Cancer. And so they connected me with this other advocacy group. And that's the one that, once I met them, just fell in love with the mission and the people and the storytelling. And then they had an opportunity of a lifetime for me to join their staff and to build a communications program for them. So, yeah, I always mention the Colon Club because they're still small, they're grassroots, they're gritty. That group is growing because this cancer is on the rise in people like us. And so even in 20 years since I've entered this, it's completely different now. Like this, people used to look at me like I was crazy. I had this story and they're like, we've never heard this before. You're one of the only people in the country. And now it's like, oh yeah, you're a young colon cancer survivor. Yeah, that's on the rise. That's prevalent. There was out last night, ABC News covered it. And between age 20 and 29, it's up over 100% growth, like colon cancer happening in this age group. So something's happening even in the population to where, these groups are growing because like survivor groups, more people are facing this.
Yeah. I definitely want to, definitely talk about the organization and advocacy work in a bit. But, let's just say you had a DeLorean, right? Back to the future. You can go back in time, right? Knowing what you know now, what would you say if you had a chance to travel back in time to face your 17-year-old self? Like, what would you say to her? Is there anything different? Would there be things that you would have changed within, I don't know, your diet or lifestyle, or maybe the environment, knowing what you know now? Like, what would you say if you had a DeLorean to go back?
That's a good question. That's a hard question. Because does she have social media? Like, like it is like my daughter thinks I feel like a dinosaur. I'm like, I promise you, I'm not even 40 years old, but like we are in two different worlds. So even if she doesn't have social media still, it's so hard to say. I'd probably tell her there's a reason you're so tired after volleyball practice, and to look into that to keep playing, because I was a pretty big athlete. Like that was important to me, but I just got so tired and worn down. And I quit playing sports. And looking back, I'm like, I bet I quit playing because my body was like had a tumor in it.
Yeah.
So that's a big one that I'd probably say, hey, keep playing. And I hid my symptoms, and I hid them from everybody who loved me. And I think I had valid reasons for that. You don't know how to go through something like that as a kid, like, especially when your home's breaking apart. My parents did end up getting divorced. So I think if I could tell her something and her situation and her context didn't change, I would just tell her I see her. And speak up, like find some safe people to tell what's really going on with you. Because outside of Mike and maybe my youth pastors, I really did not feel like I had many people I could be honest with about what was going on with me. And even then I was very selectively honest. Like, I didn't really come forth and tell people I was seeing blood in my stool. I wrote a memoir, and when I was trying to put words to that experience, the best way I could describe it, as a teenager, I got busted for like bleeding out my butt. Like, it was almost like I was in trouble because I hadn't told anybody. And now all of a sudden, like, I have a major health problem. So I have a lot more empathy for my younger self now
Mm-hmm.
than I did back then. I have a lot more compassion for her and what she
Mm-hmm.
was carrying and what she was dealing with. And I'm just sad that the younger version of me felt so alone and like I had
Yeah.
denied so much of myself. So,
Yeah. I'm sure there were cycles of, shame and guilt. And at the same time, you're also trying to navigate it. And at that time, it wasn't as prevalent or as widespread as it is today. So even the professionals, health professionals are, just as surprised, they're just, like, do we need to go to a second opinion, a third opinion, a
right.
fourth opinion,
Yeah.
because we're probably like, that shrug emoji. This is,
Definitely.
escaping. Yeah, I'm dumbfounded. Like, this is escaping me. You know what I'm
Yeah,
saying?
yeah. When my parents, I was at work, so they came up to tell me I had a colonoscopy, and they didn't tell me when I woke up what everyone thought we were dealing with. Even then, they were like, "Yeah, they found something. They had to send it off to more testing," and I was kind of like, "Okay." So went on with life, went back to school, went to work, and the Tuesday night is one of those like I'll always remember where I was, what I was doing. They came up to work and they told me, and they go, Danielle, we got your test results back from this weekend. And, they found a tumor on last Saturday and it's malignant. And I
Mm.
was like, okay, what does malignant mean? Like,
Yeah. Let's cover basics first, right?
and they were like, yeah, it's in your colon. And I'm like, colon?
What's
Like,
a colon?
what's a colon? Like, I knew large intestine, small intestine. Like, I'd never been taught colon. So that's where, like, when now I get it. I don't know if it's because I'm older or it's more prevalent. Now these vocabulary words are like more out there. People are talking about it. But even then, like, and even now with teenagers, like you have weird symptoms and pain and cramping. You don't assume you have cancer. Like
Yeah.
you don't assume you have late stage cancer. So yeah, I knew I had some like severe symptoms going on, but honestly, like having cancer never crossed my mind. And even when I was
Yeah.
first diagnosed, the what having cancer meant to me as a teenager, it wouldn't mean the same thing as if I was diagnosed today. What having cancer means would be very different today than
Mhm.
20 years ago.
Definitely. Hey guys, it's Colin Zhu. And have you ever wondered how to get started on the pathway for a healthier lifestyle? You're wondering, man, I've been hearing all about veganism and vegetarianism and becoming more whole food plant-based. And you're just asking yourself, what is that? And how do I get started? Well, you're in luck. I just partnered with Listenable, and they are a audio lesson platform. You can get it on the App Store, and they're 5-minute audio lessons where you can just take on the go anywhere that you travel, whether you're commuting, you're grocery shopping, and you are cleaning up your house. They're 5-minute audio lessons, and I partner with Listenable to create how to get started on a whole food plant-based lifestyle. And I teach anywhere from how to navigate a supermarket, how to stock your fridge, your pantry, your freezer, how to go about your kitchen and what kind of utensils and supplies you need to get. And we talk about the different food groups, and overall, we just want to get started. It's an hour lesson, and it's a great tool to put into your toolkit on how to get started on a whole food plant-based lifestyle. So, and if you go now to listenable.io, you can enter the code ColinZoo, and you can get 30% off a year on these audio courses, not just for mine, but also for anyone else's that are in the industry. And it ranges from health to psychology. Again, it's 5-minute courses, and they're great. And if you want to get healthier for this year, I highly encourage that. I always advocate the people that I speak to, my patients or clients, to not just get healthier for themselves, but also for their family, for their significant other, for their children. So I encourage you to take a listen, and thank you so much for listening, and back to the episode. because we have, better screening process, the statistics are, a lot more updated, hopefully genetics, testing, DNA testing is a lot more advanced, versus that, a couple of decades ago. I think a lot less time would have been utilized more instead of going from one opinion to another opinion to a specialty to another specialty. I think, the diagnosis would have arrived a lot quicker. And then more information gathering and more like, okay, what can I do and how do I, get better? I think just being expedited, I would presume so.
And I think it's important to say I am a rare story for a lot of reasons, but I am a success story of my doctors taking me seriously. Because the reason I didn't have a sooner diagnosis is on me. It is my responsibility because I didn't disclose what I was experiencing sooner. So those calls didn't happen sooner.
Yeah.
In my case, we called when my parents found out what I was seeing, they called my primary care physician, and on the phone, they asked some questions like, okay, tell us about this blood. Tell us how much, tell us the color. And from the phone and my answers, they said immediately, go to a GI now. Like, don't come here first. We have heard enough. Go straight to a GI. And then my GI was very rare, especially back then, to not hesitate to screen me, even though I was so young. They did an in-office test. They confirmed I had rectal bleeding, and he rushed me in there to find out why. I have lost so many friends because that did not happen for them. And they were either at a primary care office, they were at a GI office, they were at a specialty office, they were at an ER. They told them the same things I told my doctors, but they were not taken seriously. They were told you're too young. They were told, it can't be anything serious. They were given Tylenol. They were told they had diverticulitis.
And this is in regards to colon cancer diagnosis or something else?
Colon cancer. So they were told they were too young for colon cancer. They were too young for screening. They were too young for a colonoscopy, even though they had multiple symptoms of advanced stage colorectal cancer, and they were sent home. Yeah. And I'm now here still telling their stories. And it weighs on me that had they had a GI like my GI, they might be here telling their own stories, but they didn't. And, that's why it's a passion of mine for especially like primary care physicians and endoscopists and GIs. Like, they're the front lines of this. They're going to be going to these doctors first, unless they go to the ER. Because there's so much pain. And we have got to have the medical profession recognize that it does not matter how old this patient is. If they have rectal bleeding or intense abdominal pain or anything GI going, like, make sure it's not colorectal cancer.
Yeah.
Because it might be.
Yeah. Yeah, I definitely want to, that leads me to my next question, but, to kind of add to your point, I mean, the prior point is that, the medical jargon is literally another language. And if you ever had the chance to learn a secondary language in high school or junior high, it's getting the basics, getting the vocabulary, understanding where they're coming from. And unfortunately, our healthcare model is not really set up, to kind of like, get you up to speed, just, understanding the basics. I think a part of our job that's not really listed in our resume is really, in a way, we're kind of the people that translate and decipher. I think it's a super important job to be able to inform and educate appropriately and correctly, and making sure that, at least from my perspective, I'm a family doc, and I've done primary care, for the patient to not leave the door with more questions than answers. It's so important, at least for me. I can't speak for everyone, but for them to be totally informed, and then what they do with that information is really up to them, but it's super, super key, because it's such a hard area to navigate, and to me, the healthcare system is like a monster that continues to grow. And when you have something that's growing, you're going to have more and more players. And to me, it's I like using cooking analogies, but it's just too many cooks in the kitchen.
Yeah.
And sometimes it's too unnecessary. And that's where your friends, like peers, like you mentioned, kind of fall through the cracks. And it's not based off of the doctors not being well-intentioned enough or not, well educated or informed or anything like that. And from our point of view, there's a stepwise process. There's guidelines that we follow. We just try our best to see how you are in the moment, given your context and history, and then apply that to, our standard of guidelines at that moment. So to me, it is unfortunate, but it's not surprising at the same time, to answer your point.
Mm-hmm.
But my next question to you, based off of that, what would you say, because, if you were to talk to like the, 20s to, up, just shy of 50s right now, 20s to 40s right now, what are the most common misconceptions, that you get over and over from other people's experiences, dealing with colorectal cancer within these, age brackets?
Yeah. I would still say people assume you're too young, as much as that's not the case. And we're trying to get messaging out there. You cannot be too young for colorectal cancer. I just hosted a roundtable, and one of my participants was 13 when he was diagnosed, so yeah, you can get this at any age. And I think that gut health it's an interesting thing. It's a hot topic. This is how we know each other, right? So it's interesting because with it's almost this cultural focus on gut and wellness and healthy eating, which is all important. Like almost explain away your symptoms with like gut health lingo, or you're going to do a microbiome test and find out what's in your microbiome from this over-the-counter thing, or you're going to put yourself on a certain diet, elimination diet, or you're going to put yourself on some blog you found on the internet, and this is probably going to solve your GI problems. And you're doing all of this without a doctor, or you're doing all of this without an expert. And I think that, sometimes you have to have like a medical professional walk with you to really figure out what's going on with your body. And so this has been a big plea of mine, even since I was first diagnosed, is do not rely on Google. Like, guilty, I thought I had self-diagnosed with hemorrhoids. It was stage 3 colorectal cancer. And so it's like, as wonderful as resources are, as I'm a content writer, so as much as there's good stuff out there online, there's some bad stuff out there online. And so what I would, misconceptions, really think about like what you're accepting as truth based on what you're finding online, and has it been medically reviewed? Who published it? Is it, peer reviewed? If it's a study, is it credible? Is it somebody's blog because it worked for them and it was a miracle cure, or has it actually been founded and tried by other people? So
thank you for sharing that. I think the last statistic that I read was up to around 80% of people would have Googled their symptoms, their signs and symptoms, well before entering, a doctor's office. And so it's super important. I think we're in an age where we have an oversaturation and an over information and misinformation because there's just so much, versus, going back to, your 17-year-old self where, we didn't have as much, right? It wasn't as robust. The search engine wasn't as robust, or, even the people experiencing, wasn't as common. So, but this leads me to your advocacy work, your, time with Fight CRC. I have the last fall's copy of the food issue. It's so awesome. It's so awesome. This is amazing. Beyond Blue, volume 16, issue 2, Fight CRC. And it's just beautiful. I mean, the design, the copy, and it's just jam-packed with so much stuff. And so give the listeners an idea of what Fight CRC does, who's it for, and your role in it.
Yeah, thanks. Well, again, we're honored that you would be one of our featured experts. And the last issue we did, the one you're holding, is the food issue, which it is my favorite issue we've done to date. Beyond Blue is a magazine, and we produce it every fall, and then we produce one for March. And it really started out with trying to create something for that person sitting in the chemo chair. What can they read as, colorectal cancer survivor specifically, that's going to encourage them? It's going to give them some stories. It's going to give them hope. But we also want to give them information, reliable information. A lot of it, based on what we talked about prior, is just there's so much misinformation out there. So that's a big goal of ours through the magazine. I serve as the editor-in-chief, and I get to use my survivor voice to work with the team and bring in content that I think is really going to help somebody, because I've been there and I'm not in active treatment anymore, but I know what it feels like. And I know some of the questions I had, and I know what I'm dealing with now as a long-term survivor. Every day of my life, I still deal with issues from colorectal cancer. This is not going to go away. And so as more cases come, we are having more survivors. There's like 1.5 million of us. So this is for us. This is for our caregivers. It's for our loved ones. It's for our medical professionals. And it's, it's just a joy to work on this project. So I write it. It goes in line with the Fight CRC mission. So we're one of the biggest advocacy organizations for colorectal cancer in the country. And we're very focused on policy and research. And to bring people in to fight with us, we do patient education and we do awareness and storytelling. So I'm kind of a lot of times the first step, because sometimes it's easier, unless you're like a policy wonk who loved political science back in the day. Sometimes it's easiest for people to like put a toe into the water by like, hey, I'm going to read a patient story, or I'm going to read a magazine, or I'm going to download this mini mag that's going to help me with my side effects. So I'm kind of on that end of just helping people trust us and learn about our community. But once they get in, we really also want to teach them like, hey, there are decisions being made in DC that affect people like you and me. And it's not a stretch. They represent you, so I guess the way I see my role is I'm a bridge to help make policy and research feel less intimidating and help break it down for people, and not only explain what they're doing that's impacting lives, but how the reader and how advocates that can then get involved in that, how they can share their story with members of Congress and influence their decision-making on voting for medical research, for example. So that's a little snapshot, I guess, of, my role, the magazine, and how it fits with Fight CRC's bigger picture.
Yeah. And it's so important for you to kind of, operate as that bridge, because, just like you were navigating during your first diagnosis and trying to learn a lingo and, all that, it's the same thing, essentially, what you're doing. Not only are you deciphering and whittling down different perspectives, because there's so many, unfortunately, it's just too many cooks in the kitchen. You got the policy arm of it. You got, the federal government arm of it. You have, the cancer organizations, different types of American colleges, academic colleges. You have the research, so much, and so much. And I'm looking at the about us, how like sometimes the about us is only like, one or two or three. You have like 3 or 4 departments, or it's just so many. And as it needs to be, because there's just so much. And this is just one type of cancer. You know what I'm saying? The latest stats, this is around 2018 off of the CDC. It's like colorectal is like the top 4 in terms of new cancer. and the top 4 in terms of, cancer deaths, and this is behind lung, breast, and prostate, still very, very big. Cancer is still, second leading cause of death, after, heart disease. And it's just, I love it. It's beautiful. It has recipes, it has spotlights, it has people's stories. Definitely pick, are they able to still pick up this issue?
Yep, we still have copies, so they just need to go to fightcrc.org, and then in the menu drop down, click on Beyond Blue, and you can find out how to subscribe, and we can mail you a copy in a few days.
Yeah. And it's great to have something tangible. I don't know about you, Danielle, but like I'm sick of doing things virtually, but it's nice to actually hold something, a magazine, and, at least if you're distracted, you'll be distracted by the recipes inside.
That's right.
In the magazine, as opposed to like a notification, like somewhere. Right.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's great work. And my last question, I definitely want to wrap up, is quick tips. I know that you're not, you're speaking from your own personal anecdotal experience, but, are there, shared experiences, that you wish you could have done ahead of time, in terms of like whether it's screening, diet, lifestyle, environmental changes that you could, share, with someone? And obviously the caveat is, as sure you would agree, is that, if you can, get in touch with a primary or a specialist, the better for you, to kind of, be that guide. So.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I guess quick tips based on what I've been through and where I am today would be mental health, prioritize it. So, recognize how you're feeling. Are you feeling stressed? For me, stress is a big trigger. I think it is for a lot of people. Your gut is tied to your mental, emotional health. And so don't wait until it's too late to get help. That's a big, probably my number one tip. I do think, what goes in comes out. And so with your body, it's so interesting. Sometimes it's just such simple stuff. Like how many different, I'm a writer, I'm a PR person. How many different ways can we explain, like filling yourself with water, fruits and vegetables and whole grains is good for you, and not doing more of that is bad for you. Like it's just, it amazes me, like my marketing colleagues, like how they find all these ways to like basically say that. But really, like, I'm a simple girl, like back to basics. And one thing I will offer, though, part of what spawned the food issue is sometimes that's hard for me. Like a lot of raw fruits and veggies and stuff that's typically labeled healthy is hard for me to digest. And so I've found alternate ways. Like I do a lot of smoothies, a lot of soups to make it easier. And so I guess that's a quick tip, not only in food and eating, but like I'm an optimist, despite all I've been through. Like I stay optimistic. I'm always looking for a silver lining. Like I will find hope in any situation. And so I think, that has probably carried me through a lot. And so there's always light at the end of the tunnel if you're willing to look for it. Now, if you're mad and you're resolved, like, no, like, especially cancer world, this happened to me and I'm angry and I can't believe this, all this stuff. Like, yeah, it's going to be real tough to fight. But even in my experience, the good things that have come into my life because of cancer have really started to outweigh the bad. And I think that's probably true about every circumstance if you give it enough time and you're open to seeing it like that. So that's probably
awesome.
Check your thought.
Very, 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 very beautifully said. And I think with a lot of, physical, medical manifestations of what we go through continuously, I do my best to emphasize and stress this enough. And as you have right now, is really getting yourself mentally like foundation well, like building that foundation, and building it strong, because pandemic is probably the best example. I think the only positive that I got from it is, it's something that's literally shared globally. Everyone that you will ever know has an understanding. Like I can relate. Going back to earlier, like I can relate what you're saying because we all went through it, right?
Yeah.
And so in a way, it's kind of like, we have to be able to take better care of ourselves, practice more gentleness and kindness, coming from a place of compassion, and to the point where even if something is less common and not as prevalent as, back in the day for you, being diagnosed with colorectal cancer in your teens, to not disregard or invalidate, right? And it, we could substitute, colorectal cancer for something else, but just operating more from compassion. And I'm very, very glad that, those doctors, advocate for you, when they did, because the story would have totally been a different, outcome, and we wouldn't have this, lovely interview. We wouldn't have this lovely conversation. So thank you so much for what you do. I give you immense respect and props for the role and your team plays and for those that you are serving. And I hope that you continue, with, grace, with so much grace and gusto. And I look forward for Fight CRC to, flourish. And, thank you so much for, sharing your personal story with us today.
Well, thanks for having me. I have mutual respect for you and what you're doing. And I just am so thrilled that we've kind of connected. And you have a personal connection to colorectal cancer. It's like, it's crazy. A lot of people do. I think it's a prevalent cancer. So thanks for sharing that about your story and having me on your show.
Yeah, definitely. For those that are wanting to learn more about Fight CRC or looking you up in general, how can they find you?
Sure. So my website, where you can find my blog, my books, is DanielleRipley-Burgess.com. Or on social media, I'm Danielle is B. And then Fight CRC is just fightcrc.org.
Okay, awesome. And we'll put those in the show notes down below when this gets out. But thank you again. Guys, thank you so much for watching another episode of Thrive Bites. If you like this, please like and subscribe and share. And if you find this is benefit for someone else, please let them know as well. And until the next time, please say goodbye to Danielle. Hey guys, thank you so much for watching that episode. We hope that you enjoyed it. If you like this, please like, follow, and subscribe. And please follow us for the latest updates for this season, season 5. And if you feel that this was a benefit for someone else, please let them know. And please follow us on Apple Podcasts, Spotify Podcasts, and YouTube. And thank you so much again. And we will see you on the next one.